This episode of the Fine Homebuilding podcast is brought to you by Loctite's PL Premium Max. Say no to outdated and rundown. Say yes to projects that last with Loctite's PL Premium Max construction adhesive. Indoor or out, PL Premium Max is our toughest construction adhesive. It can be applied in all weather conditions and bonds to any common building material. Whether you're framing a custom home, upgrading to granite counters, or fixing up your latest flea market find, PL Premium Max is the right adhesive for the job. Say yes to a second chance. Say yes to Loctite. Visit LoctiteProducts.com for more information. Hey, podcast listeners, be sure to check out Fine Homebuilding's e-learning opportunities. We've created a special discount coupon just for you. Learn about sustainable home building, using mini-split heat pumps, insulation, finished carpentry, and more. See all of what's available at courses.finehomebuilding.com and then use the special code podcast20 for a discount on any class. That's podcast20 in all caps. Thanks for listening.
You can pour a small concrete footing just to, handle that extra load, something that's wide and thick, just for that spot.
Steven can backpack that bag of concrete in or two, right? That's not going to be a big deal to get to his home site.
Wheelbarrow.
Welcome to the Fine Homebuilding podcast, our weekly discussion of building, remodeling, and design topics aimed at anybody who cares deeply about the craft and science of working on houses. I'm Senior Editor Patrick McComb. Today I'm joined by Fine Homebuilding Editorial Advisor Mike Girton.
Good to see you.
Good to see you too. Senior Editor Brian Pontalillo.
Hey everyone.
And Senior Producer Jeff Rose.
Hi there.
Please email your questions to fhbpodcast@taunton.com. You can find previous podcasts and check out the show notes at finehomebuilding.com/podcast. Well, it's great to see you guys this morning. I was telling Jeff ahead of the show, this is my favorite part of the week. Thanks for being here.
Good to be here.
It's mine too, Patrick.
What have you guys been doing? Mike, you go first.
You know how, this morning, I got up early, went for a walk, and it was just figured nice, relaxing morning, doing a little bit on the computer. And then I get this phone call while I'm talking to my mother who lives next door from the tree cutter that I had hired to clear trees. He said, "I'm here in your driveway, ready to go." I was like, "You were supposed to call me the night before to confirm," and he didn't. So I've been running around like a crazy person the last hour because I had to show them, because we're I usually do it myself, but these trees are actually hanging over my mother's house. So they really need a lift. And so all of the chips, there's lots of wood chips from all the brush that they grind up with the chipper. I'm going to have them dump them here to save them the trouble of hauling them back to their yard and they process them into mulch and things, but figured I'd just dump them here, saves them travel time of about 20 minutes each way. So I had to wait till they filled the truck so I could bring the guy to show him where to dump it. So I just barely made it here on time.
So are you going to put this mulch in the garden? Are you going to make new beds? Or are you just going to let it decompose? What's the plan?
So the lot next door that I own, it's 2.5 acres, and it's kind of trailing off. It's got a lot of trees in a shaded area, and it just grows a lot of just low brush in that area. So I'm just going to spread it over to kind of make it more pastoral, I guess, and lower maintenance for the little saplings that I have to bring a heavy-duty brush machine in to clear every couple of years. So I'm hoping to spread it about a foot thick and keep that down. Of course, I'll be inviting termites to that area, but we'll let them do their thing. They'll enjoy it and keep them over there.
Is this an opportunity to use equipment to move this stuff around?
Yep, I've got my backhoe all checked it out. Got to change the oil next week, but yeah.
Fun.
Just push around.
Brian, have you got a chance to use heavy machinery lately?
Well, I think I already talked about my
skid steering
with the small skid steer on the podcast. Yeah, since then I have not had a chance to use any heavy equipment. Unfortunately, Amy and I were just reminiscing yesterday about how nice it was when we were building the house. We had a rented lull for about 3 weeks, and how nice it was to have that around for all different reasons. So I'm a big fan of heavy equipment.
I'll bet you
Do you
missed that. I'll bet you missed the telehandler when it left after 3 weeks.
Oh yeah. I miss it now. I need to get up to the attic patch, and I wish it was here. So Amy can lift me up on the forks. What I am thinking about, and maybe I can start off the today's episode with the first question. But what I am thinking about, because the weather's, it's getting to fall, and I'm turning my attention from outside work to inside work, I'm thinking about outfitting our various closets now. Something that I haven't done with shelves and just organization. So I have a walk-in closet in our bedroom. I have that's sort of long and narrow and has one whole wall that can be used for hanging things and shelves and whatnot. I have a laundry closet that's a bit wider than what's needed for a washer and dryer. I have a narrow linen closet, and then I have in the second bedroom, I have a about a 36-inch wide closet. It's got a full swinging door on it. It's a little bit deeper than your average region closet because we had a little bit more room there. So I'm curious what you all have done for closet organization in the past, and if you think, my better is it best to get a whole bunch of plywood delivered and customize each closet, or are there some systems that you like the wire rack systems or other things like that you think are really nifty and useful?
I'll go first because I only have a couple experience to share. I did the closet made stuff from Home Depot, the wire stuff in one couple closets in our old house. And I found the stuff flimsy and it came apart unless you zip tied it together. It would come out of its little notches in the hanging tracks that hold it. And then I made my own out of pre-finished plywood from Ring's End. And that's successful, but you need a track saw and it takes up an amazing amount of space. I think if I had to do it again, I would look to one of the online suppliers like Cab Parts or whatever, and they'll make 32 millimeter style cabinetry for those applications. So that's what I would say.
What do you think, Mike? I'm sure you've
I've
done a
used,
lot of this.
yeah, I'm not a fan of putting fixed shelves in. So I usually get the metal double slot standards, the brackets, the vertical tracks that go on the wall, attach those, and then just use different depth brackets, and then shelves, whether they're melamine shells, MDF shells, solid wood shells, whatever you like, and put those over the brackets, but mainly so that I can readjust the shelf arrangement, whether it becomes a hanging closet or whether it becomes just a storage closet. You can adapt it. But
Yeah.
that's the thing that I always worry about. If you put in fixed shelves, then you're kind of locked in.
Yeah, it seems like it would sort of be an easy way to go, but that's the drawback, right? That those are your shelves now forever.
Yep.
Yeah, and I mean, you have a small house. I'm guessing, you'll want to change things seasonally, perhaps, or you don't. It's helpful to be able to adjust that or change it for what you're doing right away.
Yeah.
What do you think, Jeff?
Yeah, well, when we moved into this house, I did our big walk-in closet with the melamine stuff, the prefabricated, and that has worked out well for the past 20 years. But
Let us know what you do, because I think that's a common question amongst folks who listen to this podcast, is my guess.
Yeah, for sure. And the closets are less sort of the less fun parts of what's coming up. I also have two. I have a right inside our front door. There's a mudroom space, and before we moved in, I built the bench. So I built basically the bottom of what's going to be our mudroom unit. It's not really a mudroom because it's really just kind of part of the kitchen, but I made sure that there was space for a bench and some cubbies and hanging stuff. And so I get to do the top of that now, which is going to be a fun project because that'll be seen in part of the room, and so I can have some fun with it. And I also need a cabinet for our bathroom that will be will be seen and is not in a closet. So those are sort of, I'm going to be working on kind of all of this at once. So I'm looking forward to getting into it.
Stain grade?
A little bit of both. Sort of. So what I did for that bench, that mudroom bench, was paint grade base with a stain grade top. So sort of, mixing it up a little bit.
Cool. Curly maple?
No, not curly maple. Actually,
Jeff,
no,
what do you?
Oh, go ahead.
Jeff, what have you been doing?
More house washing and window cleaning. Nothing very fun at all.
Isn't it depressing that once you clean a section, then the rest of it looks so much worse? You're just like, I should have just left it alone.
Yep.
I bought some good window washing stuff when we moved into this house because we have some big windows, and it just like it's a game changer. Because I bought a big squeegee on a pole and a big sort of spongy thing on a pole. I don't know what you call it, spongy thing, but it's for window cleaning, and it takes me 15 minutes to whip around the house and do the windows from the ground.
That's awesome.
Yeah,
it's nice when you have a one-story house. Yeah, single-story house. But definitely worthwhile investment because otherwise, I think of cleaning the windows as exteriors as such a pain in the butt,
You're lucky that you have casements and the screens are on the inside. That really complicates window washing when you have exterior screens. And Jeff is nodding because it's a pain. Yeah.
And snap-in grills.
Yep. And you don't have the true divided light windows. So you have all those individual panes, which are a pain.
For sure.
Well, I've been having a situation, I'll keep it brief, but I got a lazy flush. And if you think that's too much information, it's my toilet is just got a slow flush sometimes. And it has everything to do with where the pressure is at the well system, right? Higher pressures, it flushes better. When the cycle gets to be on the lower end of the pressure range, it doesn't flush as well. And I think what has happened is the holes that rinse the bowl are filled up with minerals. And I've been working on clearing that with some CLR, and it seems to be improving. But the hard water is really a challenge for my toilets. Folks who listen to the podcast, I had to replace one because the trapway got filled up with a layer of minerals, and I cracked the toilet filling it with boiling water. So don't ever do that.
Wow. I didn't realize that would happen with the mineral buildup.
I didn't either, Mike. Yeah. So I'm getting to the point where I just might replace it again because it's, I'd like to just be done with it in an hour or two instead of futzing around with it for more.
Is it the same? Oh, you cracked the other toilet, so it's not the same toilet.
Same model though. Interestingly, Brian.
It is the same one. Yeah. Huh.
Yeah.
I asked my plumber when I was shopping for fixtures for the house. I asked my plumber, who was going to be doing all the rough and work and eventually installing those fixtures, for his advice about what to buy and where to buy it. And really, I basically said, I'm asking this question in terms of durability, like, not style, that kind of thing, but really just like in terms of certain things getting durability. And I specifically was curious about the toilets. Like, I want toilets that were going to last. I don't need any particular look of toilet. And his advice, interestingly, was you can buy a lot of things at the big box stores, but don't buy your toilets there. And in his experience, he had trouble with more trouble with big box store toilets over the years than toilets from the plumbing supply houses. And he claimed even if they were the same toilets. And he gave me a very specific American Standard model that he thought was the best toilet in terms of like lasting a long time without problems. So the most problem-free toilet. But even then, he said, you're going to be able to get it at big box stores. He said, don't. And he gave me the names of a couple of places where he thought I should get it. So it's only one person's experience. One person does not make great data, but I thought that was interesting. And I thought it was particularly interesting because he didn't have the same thing to say about other fixtures.
That's what's baffling, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, listeners, if you have experience with big box toilets or ones you've bought at the supply house, please let us know what works, what doesn't. This is the thing you want to work all the time. This is
Yes.
not something you want to be messing with.
Especially when you've only got one.
Yeah, for sure. For sure. Well, as always, we heard from our fantastic listeners. This one comes from Kevin, who shared a Boston Globe article about the Springfield Habitat for Humanity using ICF builds because they're trying to keep things affordable, and these were donated, and it's expedient. All the reasons that Habitat for Humanity would choose any housing system. What do you guys think about this project? Did you follow the link and read the piece? Yeah. What do you think, Mike?
I was surprised of the conclusion that they thought it was going to be faster, easier, lower skill for the folks doing the work than what they had been doing, and it would be cheaper. Maybe I built a half dozen houses with ICFs, and I found them to take a little bit longer on the framing stage because you really have to know a lot and do a lot with the steel reinforcing that you put in. Perhaps they were using something like the Helix system, which is where they put in these they look like jacks, and they throw them into the mix so that you don't need to tie the rebar together. It's sort of a self-reinforcing concrete. But then you got to pour it, place the concrete. It just seemed like the skill level would need to be a bit higher to put ICFs up. Everybody refers to them as like stacking Legos, but there's a lot of things you got to learn. The learning curve can be steep if it's a first time or second time out.
And the stakes are high. You really want these things to not blow out when you're placing the concrete, right, Mike?
Yeah, it would seem if you have a trained crew doing regular wood frame, as we've mentioned before on the podcast, it's like everybody comes up with these new systems saying they're going to be faster, easier, whatever. And really, you get back to stick framing, and it does have a lot of efficiencies to it and the simplicity once you learn the ropes on it. And it's not that hard to learn the ropes.
Especially with the simple geometry and small size of habitat homes. When you start talking about, giant complicated roofs and stuff, the habitat homes are not that.
Right. And then you also got to think, I think they did also mention like the durability and the, resistance to damage from wind and things like that. And then, there are some benefits to ICFs or concrete homes in general. For tornadoes and hurricanes, they're going to be a lot more wind resistant than a house with a lot of windows in it that doesn't have the reinforcing at the corners for the shear.
Brian, have you ever seen concrete placed in ICF forms? I never have.
I've never been on site for a pour, but that's what terrifies me about the whole thing. Like, because as Mike mentioned, like the system may be easy to understand how the different blocks and different components work and are stacked and are put together. Once concrete trucks roll onto site, everything better be right. And a mistake is a big deal, as opposed to, you have some volunteers building a stick framed house and there's a skilled carpenter there who can fix things that aren't quite right. And the process is slow enough that one carpenter can make sure that things are being done right sort of as you go. So it seemed like a surprising choice for Habitat. Although I know Habitat's working in a lot of different ways now. It was many years ago now, maybe 5 years, but I talked to, one of the national leaders of Habitat, and a lot of the chapters were changing from volunteer labor to, actually hiring out labor and raising money in different ways to have the houses built. And a lot of the volunteer labor was actually sort of, they were taking big donations from organizations to have like team building events on the Habitat sites. And then they were using those donations to pay, a skilled drywaller to come in and drywall the house. Habitat wants to build houses for people who need houses. And I think that they're getting creative with the ways to get that done. And I think that's a good thing.
Funding. Let's be honest. I'm sure the ICF Foundation or whoever was helping to pay for these homes to be built, and I'm guessing that is a huge factor in the choice of.
Yeah.
Yeah. Oh boy, we heard from Mark, and back in episode 541, Mark thought he might be the victim of small project discrimination. He was trying to get his small kitchen remodeled and had difficulty finding a contractor who would bid on his little project. So he has an update. Well, it's been a very interesting process. I finally found a small kitchen remodeling company that took on our project. A single-person showroom/salesperson, which helped us pick out the cabinets and order them. She then recommended a small contractor service of 3 to 4 guys who did terrific quality work. There were a few bumps along the way. The cabinets took longer to get than scheduled. The contractor stated they would not need town building permits because there was hardly any electrical or plumbing work to do. 2 wall cabinets were sized wrong, and I'm still waiting for the correct doors. You'll see them missing in the attached photos. The project started on July 11th and more or less finished on September 12th. The cost was a little more than expected due to the extra electrical work. The floor needed to be leveled before the porcelain tiles could be installed, and we needed to hire a certified electrician. We were happy with the results, but what seemed like a small project because of the size of the kitchen, 12 by 10, it was far more involved than was expected. The total cost, including cabinets, was around $30,000. What do you guys think? The kitchen looks beautiful. I love it. It's really nice. I think you did good with your choices of finishes, Mark. It looks great. I asked Mark, how did the contractor get caught without having a permit? And he said our neighbor was having a porch rebuilt and their contractor had permits. The town inspector came by to check on them and saw my contractor bringing in some sheetrock. The dumpster in my driveway probably did not help. The town did a stop work notice and made them get plumbing, electric, and building permits. It just passed the final inspection last week. So get your permits, people.
Yeah, that's always one red flag when you're hiring a contractor and they say, "Oh, we don't need permits." And sometimes they don't. The way our code is been amended here in Rhode Island, I can replace kitchen countertops and kitchen cabinets without a building permit. Also replace the flooring and do the painting, but I can't do any drywall work or insulation work without permits. And then, of course, need an electrician to pull their permit and need a plumber to do their permit, which in a kitchen you could do that. So often I'll just get a permit for doing the drywall work, any insulation work, and then the sub trades the licensed trades will get their permits. But I wouldn't go in without getting something, especially, if you're going to be noticed.
Yeah, and not only that, not even like that you would want to get away with anything. And I know there's a little expense added, but if you're unsure at all about the people you're working with, right? If you had trouble hiring a contractor, so you're taking the first contractor that's willing to take the job, at least you have one more person coming in to look at the work.
Yeah, good point.
Especially with things like electrical.
And the last thing you want to do is find out that there were no permits pulled, and they were supposed to be pulled when you go to sell your house in 5, 10, 20 years from now, because on a lot of the disclosure forms, and I've done them in 3 different states. I don't know if this is the same in all states, but you have to state if there was any work done to the house that did not have a permit taken out to do the work. And you can be, if you don't disclose that there was work done without a permit, then you can get in trouble if it was discovered after a buyer buys the house. There's all kinds of gotchas with not getting a permit.
There goes my town building inspector passing my barn as we speak. I know the truck. It's hilarious.
Well, we have our final inspection for our PV system tomorrow. I'm excited about that.
Okay,
Yeah.
Brian. So who does that? Is that a town inspector? And how the heck do they know about PV?
It is a town inspector, and I believe that it's things like the roof, how the panels are situated on the roof, right? To make sure that there's I think there needs to be lanes around the panels for for firefighting and stuff like that. And in our town, I mean, this is small town stuff. We don't have we have a building official who does it all, right? We don't have a separate electrical inspector or anything like that. So, and I think it's just making sure that there are the right shutoffs in place and that kind of stuff. The cable's in conduit where it needs to be. Those types of things are what I assume he's going to look at. I'll be really curious to see tomorrow. This particular company is doing so much work around here that I'm sure he's very familiar with them and they're very familiar with him. And my guess is that it's going to be a very cursory inspection.
Are you able to net meter without the inspection being complete, Brian?
You can't operate the system. Eversource, which is our power provider, our electricity provider, won't come out and install the new meter until the inspection's done. They will come within 4 days of the final inspection to get your new meter in.
Now, do they do their own? Does the electric company do their own inspections in addition to the building inspector, electrical inspector?
I don't believe they do anything with where the installer needs to be on site. Maybe it's part of installing the meter. Yeah.
Well, keep us posted on that, because this is also something that I'm sure folks are considering and have questions about.
Yeah, I'm excited. I know we missed, unfortunately, these companies are so busy that we missed the big generating part of the year, but I'm still excited to have the system up and running and get that meter spinning backwards for a little while before the winter.
Yeah, man. This comes from Justin. Hey, FHB podcast. This is a response to your frequent discussion topic of, can a net zero house be built for $250,000? He says, only with someone building it for themselves. I'm attempting to build a more sustainably built home near net zero for the affordable nonprofit that I work for. Our budget for construction is around $230,000. All labor is provided by a local home builder and local subs. We did strike a partnership with a local community college. They will provide some of the carpentry labor, and that will reduce our final cost down to $230,000. Right now, we have about $30,000 in land acquisition, which includes cost of the land itself and demo of the existing structure. So we'll overshoot the $250,000, and that's before putting on PV, which we won't do because we sell our houses to households with an income limit. It will be their choice as to whether or not to install the PV system. The loads of the house are minimized as much as possible. Our anticipated energy budget is around 7,300 kilowatt hours for the year, and I think a 6.2 kilowatt array would satisfy those needs in our region. In a nutshell, we're building a slab on grade with 2x6, 16-inch on center, zip R12 continuous insulation, and R21 cavity bat insulation, R70 blown-in attic, R20 subslab, R10 foundation insulation, and a goal of 1 ACH50. The house will be all electric with heat pumps providing space heating via a ducted system and water heating, an ERV for fresh air, a duct chase above the 8-foot ceiling, but inside the thermal envelope so the ducts are in the conditioned space. We have to provide backup heating, which will be achieved via 5,000-watt electric resistance coil in the air handler, even though it may never be needed. Goals of minimizing roof penetrations and slab penetrations are for long-term durability. It's a simple 24 by 36 rectangle with no garage. The kitchen and bathroom share a 2x6 wet wall where all plumbing is supplied. I'm excited to see how the project goes, and I'll send updates if interested throughout the process. From my ear, it sounds like this is about as affordable a house as you could possibly make. You guys are nodding.
Yep. And it's not just affordable from the basic structure, it's also going to be affordable to operate going forward. That's the real nice thing.
This is the perfect opportunity to plug our after show, which involves this very topic. Brian, you and I both found a Green Building Advisor Q&A post very interesting, and it was titled, "I Can't Afford to Build My House Anymore." Do you want to describe the scenario the folks who wrote this email to GBA were dealing with?
Well, if I remember right, to summarize it or put it in a nutshell, these people had plans to build a house, right? And was it in Canada, Patrick?
Yes, I believe it was.
Yeah, they were in Canada.
Near Toronto.
Yeah, they had plans to build a house, and they were they had the intention to build a house, and then they took some time and they got plans together to actually build the house. And in the short amount of time that they went from looking for property, getting plans together, the cost to build the house became it just went right out of their budget. I think it was a 30 to 40% increase in the cost to build a house in the short amount of time from, oh, let's build a house, to, oh, here's the plans in the house we're going to build. And I think that this is, and so many people, what was most interesting about the thread was that so many people just said, oh yeah, that happened to me, or that's happening in my neighborhood, or I'm a builder and that's happened to a handful of my clients. So it's really become something that I'm certainly very curious about. Like, what I'm curious about all that's driving prices up, right? Not just this. We're still sort of in this odd, supply chain situation post COVID, where building materials took these huge increases and hasn't settled to where people would want it to settle to yet. We have high interest rates, but there's more than that. I think too. There's performance goals that have increased, and I think I'm also very curious about builders' role in it. I see manufacturers. I've talked about this on the show a bunch of times now, but I see manufacturers introducing newer, better products that are always more expensive. And I see a lot of builders who are good builders, just adopting these newer, better products all the time. And I wonder what's the role of that in the expense of the house, and is it really a justified expense? So
I can't wait to talk about this because, I got opinions. Anyway, it should be an interesting conversation, and I don't think anyone could argue that houses have gotten more expensive disproportionately in recent years. I'm glad you guys aren't disagreeing. So this comes from our John in Cazenovia, New York, and forgive me, John, if I pronounce your town's name incorrectly. He says, I'm writing a response to the window flashing discussion in episode 597 to tell you what I experienced after a heavy wind-driven rain episode earlier this spring. I noticed a decent-sized wet spot on the concrete basement floor with no appliances or water lines nearby. I began following the drips of water. Looking up, I could see a drop coming from the register butte and determined it was from the floor above. Then I removed the register cover located under the center point of the window and could see the smallest amount of water between the subfloor and the LVP flooring that was traveling along the outside of the register butte and dripping into the basement. I brought out my ladder and started spraying the siding with a hose to simulate a wind-driven rain episode so I could determine where I needed to remove the siding to correct the deficiency. After starting at the subfloor elevation and slowly working my way up the wall and window area to the soffit, I wasted about an hour and a ton of water and was unable to replicate the issue. Several wind-driven rainstorms later and still no leak. Do I call this a win, or worry about the wall cavity still filling with water, just not enough to make its way into the basement? Wow, this is a great question. And John has some feedback on a conversation we had earlier in a previous podcast, but we'll get to that in a minute. What do you guys think about John's leak? What's going on here?
It's the intermittent leaks like that happen once in a while when the wind is coming from just the right direction and the rain is at a certain, intensity, and that they're the hardest kinds of leak to find, locate, and then, backtrack up. I had similar thing in my own house. I woke up one morning and stepped out of my bed and into a puddle of water. And that was like 8 years after I built the house. And it was really weird. I don't live on it was a first floor. And then, of course, it leaked through to the basement. And I was like, where did this water come from? And I just kind of said, well, it was a once in a whatever. I couldn't find anything. What I found is you could try like John did, and spray the water, but you're not able to duplicate the wind pressure, which can be substantial in the amount of water that gets into the house. And it was only 2 years later, and actually removing it, when I started seeing carpenter ants crawling on my floor, I said something's going on, and I pulled all the siding and trim off of the 3 windows that were adjacent. It was at an inside corner, and at a bump out where the bed is, and I found that it was a cap flashing on top of the window, that the end of the cap flashing punctured the inside corner of where the Tyvek, when you wrap Tyvek on an inside corner, we always say, make sure you push it really tight in that corner. And when my friend who was helping me do the siding, he must have just left a little bridge there of maybe a half of an inch. And when he pushed that cap flashing in, it ruptured the cap flashing. So it was only at certain periods where the water got in, but the damage was substantial. So I would say to John, start tearing everything apart, because that's a leak that's going to keep happening, and try to figure out where it's coming from.
I've mentioned on the show, in the scenario you described, Mike, water can be forced uphill. It can be drawn into the house against gravity from negative air pressure, right? And those are really hard to find. But I think a blower door might be helpful in some instances to run that if you can with the spray test.
And your mention of the wind-driven rain and how that can go vertically, as well as if you got any appliances running that's evacuating air from inside the house, like a range hood. A wind-driven rain at 5 miles an hour driven horizontally into overlap siding, can go 5 inches vertically. When 25-mile-an-hour wind-driven rain is not a very, very strong rain, so it can find its way in.
What do you say, Brian? Should John waste a lot of time tracking down this leak or sell the house?
Well, like Mike said, it's like, it might be a time bomb, because he might be waiting for the one time where a lot of water gets in and does a lot of damage. It might not always be just a little bit of water dripping into his basement. But leaks, so interesting leaks are. I investigated a skylight leak once that was literally like a hose pouring into the house once. And when I went up on the roof, there was a whole bunch of debris on top of the skylight that I had to clear off before I could peel back shingles and take a look at how the skylight was installed. And I cleared all that debris. I never found anything that looked wrong with the skylight installation. And, what I think was really that the skylight flashing was failing because water was pooling. And as soon as water was allowed to drain, it didn't fail anymore. And I remember we put some extra, I think we cut some strips of Grace, ice and water shield, and just kind of, overlapped what was existing for flashing onto the roof sheathing, and then lapped everything back on top of it. Tried to give it some extra protection. But I really think that it was because of all the debris that had collected on top of the skylight, and it was just it was an oddity. So leaks can be hard to find, and you can take the wall apart from the outside, and you can redo the window flashing, and likely that does it, right. Do the flashing right, do the flashing the best you can with an existing window, and likely that does it. But there's also the possibility that the water's getting in somewhere else, because leaks are funny. And he found the leak on the floor, not in the wall, not
right
between the wall and the window. I mean, I know it's right below the window, but he found the leak on the floor.
Hopefully John has vinyl siding. He can just unzip that and have a peeky in there. But yeah. He has some great insights on EV chargers, which is a topic Fine Homebuilding is pursuing as a feature article as we speak. He says, you were asking about EV chargers. I purchased a Ford Lightning with the standard battery, 98 kilowatt hours, in October of 2022, and I'm using the included Ford mobile charger as my only means of charging. This is a 32 amp charger that has both a 120 and 240 plug option included. It is no longer included in the vehicle purchase and now costs $500. I installed a 50 amp circuit with a NEMA 1450 receptacle, since my intention were to purchase a 40 amp home charger, either to be plugged into this receptacle or hardwired. I just haven't gotten there yet. I have about $400 into the wire, conduit, breaker, and receptacle. For now, the setup I have, it works well and will charge the truck from 10 to 20% up to 100%, which is about 80 kilowatt hours in about 12 to 13 hours. Looking back, I would recommend that people just go with a 100 amp circuit installed to their garage to handle almost all future charging needs. Looking at the Silverado EV and Ram EV's battery sizing, 200 kilowatt hours and 229 kilowatt hours respectively, my 50 amp circuit with a 40 amp charger installed will not be able to deliver a full charge in the 12 to 13 hour window I would want. although I would only have to charge it once a week if I had the range of the Silverado or Ram, and I could let it charge for 24 plus hours on the weekend. And the industry said it is healthier for the battery to charge more slowly. With that being said, you would not want to install a level 3 charger at home because this rapid charging should only occasionally be used. Let me know if you have any other questions on this. I've gone quite far down the rabbit hole.
Glad he's sharing the rabbits with us.
Have you considered the Ford Lightning there, Mike? No. You're going to stick with your old truck forever, my guess.
Yeah, there's something to be said for buying beat up old used trucks and not worrying about them. I just don't care what I do to my truck. I walk on the roof. I back up into a stone wall. I don't want another new vehicle because it's just one more thing I'll worry about when I'm driving it.
How do you feel, Brian? You have an old truck too.
Yeah, I have an old truck too. I think that an electric vehicle may be in our future here at our house, especially if we have surplus electricity from the PV that I mentioned earlier.
Yeah.
I don't think it'll be for me. I don't think it will be a truck. I think it'll be a commuter vehicle for Amy, and I will continue to drive old trucks, especially because I don't do a whole lot of driving, and mostly I use it on the weekend when I'm throwing stuff in the back of it. Yeah.
That's something to consider too. I filled up my truck the other day, and I'm one of those old-fashioned people. I actually keep a log of when I fill it up, how many gallons and how much it cost and all that, and figure out the miles per gallon, something I inherited from my father. Anyhow, the last time I filled my truck up was April 28th. So if you can go...
It would take you a long time to pay off that $80,000 Ford Lightning.
Yeah.
Jeff, you're considering all new vehicles, right? You're going to update the fleet, right?
Oh, yeah. Get a 19-year-old Honda instead of a 23-year-old Honda.
I told Carol the next truck I want is even older than the one I got. I want it to be like from the 70s so you can fix it with a broom handle.
Patrick, if you need a truck project, you can come over this weekend and help me figure out why my windshield wipers won't stop.
It seems like a better problem than when they won't run.
I thought the same thing.
You just need to wire a switch into the fuse, Brian. You can fix that easy. This comes from Heath, one of our YouTube listeners. He had a comment on 596. He said, I just bought a cabinet that is 612 square feet. The living room and kitchen area are on a concrete slab and has had termite damage, and the lap siding has no sheathing underneath. It's down to studs now. In what order would you deconstruct this and rebuild? Start with the reframing, then siding, or siding first, then reframe? I thought this was a good opportunity to talk about the typical order of construction and when you would deviate. And what do you guys think about this?
I would, yeah. It just, it's one of those questions. It's like, well, there's only really one way to do it. I wouldn't do it backwards. But I guess that's because when you're steeped in construction, you think one way. Yeah, you only think one way. You build from the bottom up, not from the top down, generally. I would do all your demolition and then at that point rebuild, starting with the reframing, and then put on sheathing, and then put on siding, and then put on your, the paint.
I don't see another way to do it. The only time I've left
something, and maybe are we missing something? Because otherwise it is like I don't, unless maybe he's just very new to this. But yeah, you can't put siding on until you fixed the framing, right? Or am I missing something?
Well, so I would say the only exception to that would be if the framing damage is minimal, then you could potentially, replace it in sections. But generally speaking, you want to do all the structural repair and then work on putting the thing back together. So I think that's a.
Now, if he's down to the studs at this point, maybe this is where his question is coming in. Because it's termite damage, the termite damage can it's really weird the way they'll travel. It's like you'll feel like one little piece of the bottom plate will be eaten up, and then like 3 studs down, they'll kind of travel in a mud tube, not through the wood, but alongside the bottom plate, and then they'll burrow up into a stud. So maybe he's asking, do you, attack it one stud at a time, or do you tear the whole wall down and reframe it? And I think that depends on figuring out where the damage is. Sometimes you can just sister part of a stud. Sometimes you have to take the whole stud out. And if the siding is applied directly to the studs, he might be thinking, well, do I need to tear all the siding off in order to replace the studs? And in that case, maybe you do and maybe you don't. If you're just going to need to replace 2 or 3 studs, then, and you're not going to resheath it and, rebuild the whole wall if most of the siding is in good shape, then yeah, you can just take a recip saw from the inside, since you've already gutted it out, run that recip saw blade down to disconnect the stud from the siding, install that new stud, and then anchor the existing siding from the outside just by face nailing through. So you could do it that way as well.
I hope that Heath will send us some photos of his little cabin. And I think you guys know I like working on structural repairs. Instant gratification, right? You take this junky thing and then you've made it suddenly safer and better very quickly.
Yeah, and if he has some follow-up questions on a specific detail that he's trying to sort through, then send that along as well, because that's where we can really get into answering a question with more information.
You guys may remember Mark in the last episode, we batted around his problem with his house, and we saved the situation with him having to add water to his hydronic heating system. His question we answered in the last show had to do with the complexity of his HVAC system. And another question he tacked on at the end, but we had ran out of time to talk about, was having to add water to his in-floor heat, and I'll read that part of it now. The other issue I'm dealing with is having to add water to the hydronic system. We've moved it in at the beginning of July 2022, and the combination boiler threw an error code for high/low pressure, and we had no domestic hot water one morning during the first week of March. The HVAC contractor who did the installation came out and added some water to the system. We talked about the possibility of air in the system, and I watched the water addition process, but I made no notes regarding the pressure reading before and after the water was added. Last week of March 2023, the same error code appeared on the boiler, and a group of the 4 guys from the HVAC contractor stopped by on their way home from a seminar given by an equipment supplier. They didn't have the needed tools to add water, but we discussed this process again. You're just lucky they didn't have the tools, because they might not have been sober, having gone to the supply house. We talked about adding a system feeder to keep the glycol/water mixture automatically topped off, specifically an Axiom DMF 150 pressure PAL. As a side note, there have been no penetrations into the floor to install anything since we moved in, and I can see no readily visible signs of a leak in the mechanical room or hydronic plumbing. I obtained the needed parts at the home store and added more water myself to restore the proper function of the system. The HVAC contractor gave me an estimate for the system feeder of $1,300 installed. I've had to add water 3 more times since then. It's now a total of 5 additions, and I found that the more water I add each time, resulting in a higher system pressure on the gauge, staying within the boiler manufacturer's recommendations, of course, the longer it takes for the pressure fault to be set on the boiler. So I suspect there's a small but consistent leak somewhere in the system. In my online searching, I have found that water should not need to be added to a hydronic system unless there is indeed a leak. But the fact that the companies make devices to automatically add fluid to a hydronic system leads me to believe that this is not an uncommon occurrence. How concerned should I be about the hydronic systems that apparently has a small leak, and just how common is it to have a system feeder in a residential system? So, of course, I'm guessing none of us know anything about this. Maybe you do, Mike. You've got experience with hydronic plumbing, right?
I don't have experience with combo heaters, but I do with regular boilers, because they're in all of my rental houses, and I've grown up with them. And we always install a system feeder, automatic feed. In fact, that's one of the headaches that we often have, is that automatic feed will sometimes fail for either not supplying water to the system when it needs refilling, or it'll supply too much. But that's a sidebar. So I'm surprised that I'm not familiar with this Axiom DFM 150 automatic feed, but the ones that we install they're only like 100, $125, and it only takes it's just cut the pipe and put it in, solder it in. It's not a big deal. So $1,300 sounds expensive there. But usually they don't have to feed much water in. It's more when we'll be servicing the system where we might be bleeding off some water, and that way we don't have to go to the effort to
add water later,
and
days later,
yeah. But I think you probably checked with somebody who knows more about this.
I had to ask Mike Lombardi, my dear friend, and he was kind enough to have a pretty comprehensive response. So I'll read that now. He says, "Hey, Patrick, I wish I could give you a simple answer and solution, but no two systems are alike. I'll try to help. New closed hydronic systems may need an occasional refill, usually in the first 6 to 12 weeks. Fresh water is laden with oxygen and other gases. Repeated heatings in a closed system cause the dissolved oxygen to exit the water as a gas, and hopefully leave the closed system with a proper and properly located automatic vent or micro bubble air scrubbing separators. Air is the enemy of all ferrous components, so removing it from closed loop heating system as quickly and effectively as possible is important." I'm guessing because that makes the components rust, right? Which would sacrifice the system. Mike's nodding. Okay. As systems burp oxygen, the system pressure is reduced and more water is needed to maintain pressure. Systems with auto refill valves will add water to a pressure set point, typically 12 to 15 psi, and then the venting cycle continues with the fresh water until a pressure equilibrium is finally reached, usually in 6 to 12 weeks. There are factors that complicate system pressure and venting. Incorrect near boiler and manifold piping, the location of auto air vents, the location of circulators, the lack of primary/secondary piping, the size and location of the compression tank, system size and operating temperatures, control strategies, non-oxygen barrier tubing. My first suggestion for the homeowner would be to perform a system pressure test. Even new pipe valves, fittings, and other components can have small leaks. If the pressure test holds, I'd have an expert look at the overall system. There you go.
And there's one other thing and I couldn't gather from Mark's description. Sometimes the sensors that are sensing pressure that caused the fault might be faulty themselves. So, that's just a little micro sensor, and there could be some minerals in the water that used to fill the system that have contaminated that sensor, and now it's not registering properly, and then it gives a fault. So and those gauges, those gauges, the little dial gauges with the pressure gauges, they don't always give you the exact pressure reading. I found those to be faulty as well. So those might be some other things that his hydronic technicians can check out.
All good advice. And Mike, if you're listening, thanks very much for the help as always. It's really, really, really appreciated. This is a question you got, Mike. Do you want to share with listeners what Steven asked you?
You know what? If you could read it, because I don't have it in front of me, because
sure.
I don't have an updated script.
No problem. He says, "I'm a capable DIYer and planning a small cabin built in the Catskills for my family. I'd like to use a permanent wood foundation with a concrete-free slab, but I'm not sure if it's suitable for my situation. The lot is sloping, so the basement will have a walkout on one side. On the opposite side from the walkout, foundation will be backfilled about 4.5 feet high. I'm concerned that a concrete-free basement slab A layer of insulation covered by 2 layers of subfloor sheathing glued and screwed together won't be able to resist the soil pressure on the backfilled foundation wall. Do you think the concrete free slab will resist the backfilled wall? If not, are there any alternatives? Also, the cabin design has a couple of 8x8 posts carrying concentrated loads from the roof ridge beam. Can the PWF footing plate handle a point load? I like the idea of a permanent wood foundation and a concrete free slab because they're DIY friendly with my carpentry skill set, and they can be built in stages on weekends and vacation versus forming and pouring the finishing the concrete, which can't be done easily piecemeal. All right.
All right.
What do you think,
Yeah,
Mike?
I answered because I got this from in an email, and the you do have to be concerned about the permanent wood foundations at the bottom. You can't just set them down on the crushed stone, and the crushed stone is essentially the footing. Set it down on the crushed stone, the panels, and then backfill it without having something that resists that bottom, the force of the soil pushing against the bottom of those, the bottom of the panels. So usually, if you're doing an all wood foundation where you're including the basement slab as wood, you actually frame it with floor joists, like 2x4s or 2x6s, and then you put your pressure treated plywood on top of that. But what Steven's talking about is using a concrete free slab, which would be, let me back up a second. The other alternative to framing a floor system in a permanent wood foundation would be to pour a concrete slab. So Stephen wants to avoid the concrete slab and avoid framing those 2x4s or 2x6s with the sheathing, and instead he wants to use the concrete free slab, which is where you take a layer of insulation foam and then you put 2 layers of OSB or plywood screwed together to form that slab, essentially. But that's going to buckle under pressure if you pushed it sideways, whereas the floor joist system built out of wood, which is a conventional way to do the all-weather wood foundation basement slab. So what I would recommend there is you can still use the concrete free slab, but you have to resist that tendency for the backfill of the soil on the outside of that foundation from moving the bottom of the wall in. So how can you do that? Easiest way is you dig a little bit deeper, maybe an extra 6 inches deeper than what you need for when you put the wall panels in, the foundation walls. And then you backfill in on the inside edge of the foundation by that 6 inches. So you'd put at the bottom of the panels, once they're up, the foundation panels, put a 2x6 and horizontally nailed against the side of the bottom of the panels. Then you compact the soil up and then do the concrete free slab on top of that. That way the soil that would be beneath your concrete free slab will resist that pressure of the backfill on the outside. So
That is an elegant solution.
Yep. And it's one of the details, I puzzled on this for a couple of minutes, and then I went back and I looked at the details from the Southern Pine Council's installation manual for permanent wood foundations. And it's a detail that they show for crawl spaces. And you can imagine in a crawl space, a lot of crawl spaces, you don't put a rat slab underneath, you just leave it dirt. So what you have to do is exactly what I described there. You bury that foundation wall a little bit on the inside so that the soil's preventing it from moving.
And I'm guessing it would be a good idea to backfill with gravel rather than native material, but right, you're nodding. Yeah.
And that's a good idea, crushed stone, gravel, something that's not going to hold the moisture against the foundation. And then the second question he had was about the concentrated loads coming down from the roof or the floor load above. Usually these permanent wood foundations are intended for uniform loading all the way around. They can take some concentrated loads, but not an 8x8 post that might be holding up some large beam above. So in that case, there are some details in the Southern Pine Council's manual for what they call I forget what it's called now, but you basically build a bigger footing underneath the panels when you're laying down. So typical footing is going to be like a 2x8, 2x10, or 2x12 that you lay down flat on top of your crushed stone. Where you go and have a concentrated load, what you can do is take a 24-inch wide by, say, 4-foot long piece of pressure-treated plywood. You put 3 or 4 layers together to build it up to be maybe 2 inches thick, and then that would distribute that load over the surface of the earth. You'd have to do a tributary load calculation for your roof load, floor load, whatever's coming down that post, and then you can figure out how large of that wood footing. Or you can pour a small concrete footing just to, handle that extra load, something that's wide and thick, just for that spot.
Stephen can backpack that bag of concrete in or two, right? Yeah. That's not going to be a big deal to get to his home site.
Wheelbarrow.
Carrying the 8x8.
That's right.
Yeah.
You know what I love about the design details for the permanent wood foundation, Mike, is they are like so common sense. It's just like if you asked a handy kid who was used to building forts how to build a fort out of pressure treated lumber and plywood, the details are similar to what they come up with, I'm guessing.
Maybe not the first time, but when they have to fix it after it falls down, right. Then they'd figure it out, right? That's the way we all learn.
I'll put a link to that document on the podcast page because if anyone's interested in the permanent wood foundation system, all the details are in this document. It's free. I've had reservations at points in my career, but I've become a convert because Mike says it works. So there you go. Brian's looking a little shocked.
I'm shocked that you've become a convert.
That's what I thought.
This is permanent wood foundation. I'm even skeptical of permanent wood foundation. So if I'm skeptical of something, I imagine it would just you'd have smoke coming out of your ears, Patrick.
Well, it has been a delight talking to you guys. Thanks very much for being here. Unfortunately, that is all the time we have today. I hope you all will stay tuned for the Fine Homebuilding Members All Access podcast after show, and where we're going to be talking about the cost of custom builds and how to make them more affordable. I don't know that we have any answers, but it should be an interesting conversation. Thanks to Mike, Brian, and Jeff for joining me, and thanks to all of you for listening. Please remember to send us your comments, questions, and suggestions to fhbpodcast@taunton.com. And please like, comment, or review us however you're listening. It helps other folks find our podcast. Stay safe, everybody. Keep craft alive. Thanks very much for listening.